On the 4th of January 1946, a 27-year-old former soldier in the British Army was led out to the execution chamber inside of Pentonville Prison in London for his date with the hangman. He was someone who had a checkered history as a former member of the British Union of Fascists, but after his capture during World War II, Theodore Schurch worked for the Axis forces, the enemies of the British, and he was a spy who managed to gain the trust of many senior captured officials inside of prisoner of war camps. But he was captured at the end of the conflict and was condemned for his actions. Today's Schurch is seen alongside other traitors such as Lord Haw, William Joyce, and also John Amory, as one of the final traitors executed by the British realm, a nation who had for centuries been hanging and brutally executing some of their own who betrayed their fight and crown. But what happened with his execution? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Theodore Schurch was born in Hammersmith in London on the 5th of May 1918. His father was a Swiss and was living in Britain at the time, and through this, Schurch held Swiss citizenship as well as a British citizenship. When he was a teenager, he became attracted to a group known as the British Union of Fascists, or the BUF as they were more commonly known, led by Oswald Mosley. This was a fascist political party, which later became banned, but the party claimed it had around 40,000 members at one point, and they had become increasingly more radical, often getting involved in violent confrontations with anti-fascists and people who opposed them. William Joyce, the Second World War Lord Haw, was also a member of the group, but Theodore Schurch, it's believed, continued to go to meetings of the BUF. In 1936 he enlisted to fight in the British Army, and specifically trained as a driver in the Royal Army Service Corps. As the Second World War broke out, he was involved in fighting, especially in the desert against the Axis forces, and in June 1942, Schurch was captured by the enemy at Tobruk during the North Africa campaign. He was interrogated by the German forces, and during this he agreed to become an agent who would pass over intelligence and information to the Axis, including the Nazis and also the Italians. He would maintain that he was a prisoner of war, and during his time inside different prisons and camps, he would speak to members of the British forces who were captured and attempt to gain their trust, and once he found out things about the military, he would then pass over this intelligence to the enemy. He even spoke with Lieutenant Colonel Sir David Stirling, the founder of the SAS, and tried to get whatever information he could. Stirling later gave a statement for evidence for Schurch's trial about this meeting. In this he claimed that Schurch was using a false identity, that of Captain Richards. Stirling claimed that, between February the 15th and February the 20th, 1943, when I was a prisoner of war in a special interrogation centre in Rome at the cavalry barracks, I was interrogated by a German and an Italian staff officer. This lasted about half an hour and was quite a normal routine interrogation. Another officer who was awaiting interrogation at that time was a Captain Richards of the RASC. Richards was in an adjoining cell with an RAF officer from the Chilt Camps 21. During the 5-day period I saw Richards at mealtimes and at exercise, and had a number of conversations with him and the Air Force officer together. I received warning from this Air Force officer, and in consequence of was very careful what I said to Richards. I did however tell Richards that I was the CO of the SAS, as I believe he was already aware of that. At no time did I tell Richards any accurate information or secret information, or discuss the true workings of the SAS. Such information as I passed to him was untrue and designed to deceive him. I can't remember Richards discussing the name of my successor in the SAS. I did not tell him it was Captain Paddy Mayne. In fact, at that time I was unaware of my successor's identity. I later learned it was Colonel Jellicoe, and it was for some months later before Paddy Mayne took over. Captain Richards told me he had a Swiss mother and a London-born father. He was an obvious Cockney. I could identify him. Schurch continued on other occasions in North Africa. He then was moved to Rome, and spoke with Stirling, who was a POW, about the SAS, and then informed the enemy of what he had learned, and he also spoke with naval POWs and captured officers, and managed to communicate information to the Nazis. He was charged with further incidents in Rome and then desertion relating to absenting himself from the British Army in October 1942 to join the enemy. His court-martial proceedings took place at the Duke of York's headquarters in Chelsea, London, and during the court-martial he wanted to know the specific religion of the judges, as he refused to be tried by a Jewish judge, showing his true allegiance to the Nazi beliefs and the policies. Theodore Schurch was found guilty of all counts, and he was then given the death sentence. He was then briefly sent to Pentonville Prison, where he was to await his execution, sitting on death row for some time. His execution would occur on the 4th of January 1946, and the day before, the executioner, Albert Pierpoint, had condemned William Joyce Lord Haw-Haw, the infamous traitor and radio broadcaster, who made shows such as London Calling for the Nazis, and he had also been hanged. Just before 9 a.m, Theodore Schurch was brought into the Green Execution Chamber by Albert Pierpoint and his assistant. Previously he had met with Schurch to work out his height and weight, and also the drop needed to bring his life to an end and to snap his neck. Before he went onto the trapdoor, Schurch's identity was confirmed, and then Pierpoint led him over to the trapdoor of the gallows. The 27-year-old Theodore Schurch was moved over to a chalk X on the floor which had been drawn, and Albert Pierpoint, who was very experienced, placed a cap over his head, followed by the noose, and then made some small alterations and secured it. Seconds later, Pierpoint did not mess around, and the executioner pushed the lever, which opened the trapdoor of the chamber, and in this the execution of the only British soldier to have been convicted of treason during the Second World War came about, as Theodore Schurch crashed through the gallows, and minutes later a doctor arrived inside of the execution chamber to confirm that death had occurred. Theodore Schurch willingly during the Second World War passed information to the enemies of the British, and he would deny this, but the evidence stacked against him was colossal. He was someone who, let's remember, had already been a member of the BUF. He is shockingly, though, commemorated on the Brookwood Memorial today for some reason, alongside a number of genuine Second World War heroes, but he was a traitor and a turncoat who had previously displayed his tendencies for the enemy ideology since he was a teenager. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.